I booked the ticket using my late husband's surname. No assistant arranged the trip. No corporate message flagged my presence, and no executive notice appeared in the airline system. There was only a simple printed boarding pass, a modest leather handbag, and seat 1A, waiting in the first-class cabin. At 72 years old, I travel like this on purpose. When people see an elderly woman walking alone through an airport, they rarely imagine influence or authority. More often, they see someone quiet, someone forgettable, someone easy to overlook. 4 decades ago, my husband and I started this airline with almost nothing. One leased aircraft, a cramped office with peeling paint, and a promise scribbled across a yellow legal pad. The promise was simple. Every passenger would be treated with dignity, not because they were wealthy, not because they looked important, and certainly not because someone recognized their name. Respect, we believed, should never depend on status. Over the years, the company expanded across continents. Our aircraft crossed oceans and connected cities around the world. But growth alone never proves integrity. Culture? And culture reveals itself in the smallest interactions. Boarding that morning appeared smooth and efficient. Smiles were polished, uniforms perfectly pressed, announcements calm and confident. Everything looked exactly as it should until I reached seat 1A. A young man in a sharp, expensive suit was already seated there. He leaned comfortably back, scrolling through his phone while a glass of sparkling water rested on the armrest beside him. The flight attendant glanced at my boarding pass, hesitated for a moment, and then forced a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am," she said softly. "That seat has been reassigned." "Reassigned?" I asked, lowering my gaze to the ticket again. The numbers were clear. 1A. When was this change made? Her expression stiffened slightly. "It was an operational decision." Operational. I considered the word quietly. Every other passenger in first class appeared to be sitting exactly where their boarding passes indicated. Only my seat had changed. "You're welcome to take a seat in business class instead," she added quickly. "It's just a short flight. Just a few hours," she meant. "Just a small adjustment." No explanation. No apology. Oh, apology. Simply a quiet expectation that I would accept the downgrade without question. Around us, several passengers glanced in my direction for a brief moment before returning their attention to their phones and magazines. To them, I was simply an elderly woman traveling alone, easy to move, easy to relocate, easy to disregard. I nodded once and spoke calmly. "I'll remain in the seat printed on my boarding pass." The cabin atmosphere shifted subtly. A few minutes later, the lead flight attendant approached. Her posture was straighter now, her voice more controlled. "Ma'am, we've already explained the situation. My ticket says 1A, I replied evenly. "If necessary, we can ask the captain to assist," she said. There it was, the shift from service to authority, from hospitality to pressure, the assumption that persistence would make me yield. But I did not argue. I did not raise my voice, and I did not move, because the seat itself was never the issue. I was observing something far more important. As the flight continued, the pattern quietly revealed itself. Water was offered generously to other passengers, but somehow skipped over my seat. Warm, engaging smiles were given to the travelers beside me, while my interactions remained polite, yet distant. When the meal service began, options were described enthusiastically to everyone around me. Mine arrived with minimal conversation and a brief nod. Nothing was openly rude. Nothing dramatic enough to cause a scene, just a series of subtle differences, the kind that can easily hide behind professional behavior. At 35,000 feet, assumptions rarely appear loudly. They are quiet, polished, almost invisible, yet they remain noticeable to anyone who understands human behavior. Leadership, I've learned, is not tested in executive boardrooms or shareholder meetings. It is tested in moments when employees believe no one influential is watching. When the plane finally landed, passengers stood and began collecting their coats and bags from the overhead compartments. Conversations resumed, phones turned back on, and the familiar shuffle of arrival filled the cabin. I remained seated. The lead attendant approached again, a hint of tension now visible beneath her composure. "Ma'am, we've arrived." In a moment, I replied gently. I stood slowly and reached into my handbag. From inside, I removed a small identification card and handed it to her. She glanced down at the name, then she read it again. The color slowly drained from her face. "I'll need the captain and the entire cabin crew to remain on board for a moment," I said calmly. "This conversation won't take long." Within minutes, the captain appeared, confusion visible in his expression until his eyes met the name on the card in the attendant's hand. Understanding arrived quickly. "I am the co-founder and majority shareholder of this airline," I said quietly. The cabin fell completely silent. There were no raised voices. No anger, only the weight of truth settling into the room. "This is not about a seat," I continued. "It is about perception, about how an elderly woman traveling alone is treated when staff believes she has no influence." The crew stood motionless. "I boarded today without notifying anyone," I explained. "I wanted to evaluate our service culture from the perspective of an ordinary passenger." I paused briefly. Professionalism must never depend on who you believe someone is. Respect should never diminish with age, and service should never change based on assumptions. There was no public humiliation, no dramatic reprimand, only accountability. Upon arrival, both management and operations were informed immediately. Later that evening, I personally reviewed the full report. Some members of the crew would undergo additional training. Others would be reassigned to different positions, and a few would no longer represent the company at all, because an airline is not defined by the size of its fleet or the number of routes it operates. It is defined by how its quietest passengers are treated. True luxury is not leather seating or champagne poured into crystal glasses. True luxury is dignity, especially for the people society assumes no one important is watching. At 35,000 feet above the earth, character becomes visible, and respect, more often than not, reveals itself in silence.